Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hi. As president of this wonderful college, I get to say welcome to our community friends and our faculty and our staff and our students. This is the spring presidential lecture, and we're very, very pleased to have one of our very special faculty address you today. Since 2000, the presidential lecture series has brought a distinguished member of the CUNY faculty or higher education leader to this campus for a fall lecture. And in the spring, we get to select one of our own very illustrious faculty. And that's never an easy decision because we have so many who are great. I would like to thank you for joining us today. And I'd like to thank the Presidential Lecture Committee, Dr. David Humphreys from the Department of English, who's a former presidential lecturer, Dr. Azi Alay from the Department of Social Sciences, Dr. Paul Sideris from the Department of Chemistry, Dr. Sandra Palmer, our Dean of Faculty, and we all welcome you this afternoon. Professor Julian Jimenez, and he will explain his name, plural names, is really a star in our Department of Speech Communication and Theater Arts. He's a noted playwright and director, and his most recent work, called Another, advances his strong belief that theatrical voices can ignite a social revolution within an audience by presenting really incredibly strong depictions of people who are sometimes stereotyped or ostracized or feeling disenfranchised. His play, Another, was developed in collaboration with student performers. It's one of the unique aspects of his accomplishment. And these students who performed offer a very unique access to ideas and perspectives through their voices, through their movements. The play, Julian's play, Another, was honored at the Region 2 Kennedy Center American Theater Festival in January, where it was selected as the opening production of the week-long festival. And the company, or Another, was honored with the Citizen Artist Award. It was my privilege, along with colleagues from the faculty and staff, to attend that performance. It was in New Jersey, and it was extraordinarily powerful and moving to be in a theater with almost 1,000 people really experiencing this extraordinary work. In the last week, we received news that the National Committee of the Kennedy Center College Theater Festival recognizes Professor Jimenez and his production of Another with five top honors in the country. So we went beyond the region. We scored top in the country for distinguished production of a new or devised work, for distinguished director of a new or devised work, God bless you, Julian himself, for distinguished ensemble of a play, for distinguished performance by an actress, one of our own students, Ksenia Bolinkenia. And the Kennedy Center Citizenship Award was given, again, for the work that this play, and actually the concept of it, the work it does to really advance theater. I am so very proud on behalf of the college to present our presidential lecturer, known in the theater profession as J. Julian Christopher, and known here and far as a creative and passionate advocate who really advances art, theater as art, and as an impactful experience for all of us, the actors, the production crew, and the audience. So please, welcome Julian.
Thank you. I'm just going to set up my presentation for a second. Great. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Call, and the Committee for the Presidential Lecture for having me. I am honored beyond belief. I was standing on the corner of 21st and 7th the other day, waiting for the light to change, and a man next to me was holding a leash to his greyhound. It was a beautiful dog, tight muscles pressed against gray charcoal skin. It was beautiful. Suddenly the dog started to bark, and the man yanked the leash violently and slapped the dog's face with a newspaper. I wanted to beat the hell out of this guy. But then the dog looked at me. He looked me straight in my eyes, and in that instant, I knew exactly what he was going to do. And he jetted out into the street and was struck by a yellow cab. For years, I've felt like this, a hollow, vacant shell of a man holding the dead me in place, like there's a corpse rotting inside me, like I'm some sort of ancient sarcophagus holding me in place, and that there's a knife-like pain, and every time I breathe, it's piercing some new vital organ. And every time I breathe more, it pierces through my rib cage. And it's like blood is spilling out of my veins. And I have everything I need to live, but it's just floating, disconnected in my body. And that's how I feel most of the time. That was a monologue from my play Animals Commit Suicide, which I wrote in 2009. And the reason I bring this monologue up is because it talks about queer identity. And I wrote this play in regards to how I was feeling as a queer male in society at the time. And this was pre-lawful same-sex marriage, now that is thankfully, hopefully will remain, the law of the land. And I was trying to figure out what was my identity? What was I trying, what did I want? So the play was steeped in shame. And a lot of people in the queer community, the LGBTQ community, have a lot of shame because of the societal standard of heteronormative ideals. And I was searching for an answer of what this could possibly mean. In the play, the character is seeking HIV infection. Now, although this was a work of fiction, I understood where this character can come from. It was important that the character was taking extreme means in order to identify. And the character thought that if he could identify with the HIV community, he'd have a built-in community that would take him in and embrace him. And that is what I was searching for at the time. Fast forward. I grew up in Levittown, Long Island, not too far from here. And I grew up in the early, I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. And if you know anything about Levittown, Long Island, it is a community that was set up post-World War II, mostly for veterans. So there's a certain demographic that is there. And growing up with a Puerto Rican mother and a Dominican father, it was, let's just say it didn't come without its set of challenges. The interesting thing about growing up in Levittown, Long Island, as a Puerto Rican and Dominican person, is that we actually didn't know we were Dominican and Puerto Rican, me and my sister, who's in the audience right now. I won't point her out because I won't embarrass her. We didn't necessarily know, we knew it, but we didn't know what it meant to be a Latino, right? We didn't understand it because our parents, rightfully so, and at the time, chose to not teach us Spanish and grow us up in an anglicized household. And I understand for the time period why that was the way it was. About 88.9%, according to the 2011 census, is white in Levittown, and only 11.5 is Latino or Hispanic. And that's 2011. So you can imagine 1978, 1980, around that time, it was a lot less than that. And so I was searching for an identity for a very long time. What did it mean to be Latino? What did it mean to be a person who pronounces their last name Jimenez instead of Jimenez? Right? Because that's how my parents pronounced it, so I was Jimenez. So I didn't know what that was about. So I was constantly searching. I was even searching all the way until I went to college, and I went to undergrad. In undergraduate school, I remember going to LASSO, which was the Latin American student organization, because I was like, in college, I'm gonna figure out what my roots were, right? And I went, and I remember I was rejected from the entire club. And they said, you don't speak Spanish, you don't look Latino, you don't know what it's like. And I wasn't Latino enough. So I was constantly searching for what it meant to be a Latino male in life and how that reflected me without knowing a word of Spanish. I could understand a lot of it because I had a very verbal Puerto Rican grandmother. So I could understand, and my parents spoke Spanish because they wanted to keep secrets from us. So around Christmas time, my Spanish became really good. So I was always trying to find that perspective. So then, even as I went after undergrad, I was like, I'm gonna be an actor. I was a theater minor actually in undergraduate school, but I was like, I'm gonna be an actor. I'm gonna do it. So I went out to audition, and I would audition, and I would audition. And what ended up happening was they were like, you don't speak Spanish? Because I was auditioning under Christopher Julian Jimenez, which is my birth name. You don't speak Spanish. Or they come in and they're like, no, you're Greek. They're like, oh no, you play Jewish. You play Mediterranean. You play Italian. You will never be cast as Dominican. So, being a fresh out of college 22-year-old, I heeded the advice of a very vocal and adamant manager, who said, you'll get work if you anglicize your name. You gotta change your name. He didn't say anglicize, I'm interjecting that. He said change your name. So what that I was translating, anglicize it. So I just rearranged everything. So J. Julian Christopher, J. period, is Jimenez, Julian's my middle name. I just like jumbled it all up. And I went out to audition. I didn't get anything. Because then it was like, oh, you're too overweight for 20-something. You'll get a lot of work when you're 40. So I'd still be waiting for another 9 months. So I was like, okay. And then they were like, butch it up. You're a little too femme. I was like, okay, that's why it's called acting, but sure. So I didn't know where I fit in that entire, in the theater community at all. I was this overweight, nondescript Latino who couldn't speak Spanish, who was queer, right? And I'm like, where do I go? So I was like, oh, I'll go to grad school. When you don't know what to do, you go to grad school. At least that was my reality. So I went to grad school, did the whole thing, finished grad school at the Actors Studio, left, and realized I still was not 40. I was still not brown enough. I was still not Latino enough. And I was still not butch enough. So I was like, I don't see people on stage that look like me. I don't see people on stage that represent me. I see stereotypes. I see ideas of people. I see when I would go out to audition, they were like, well, what makes it more Latino? They're like, put a bandana on your head. Stuff like that. This is what you face sometimes in the professional theater community, because the money is the dollar, right? The dollar is everything, is the power. So I decided, screw that, I'm gonna start writing plays that I can be in, so I can perform. I'm going to perform these plays. I'm gonna write for people exactly like me. And that's what I did. That's what I started to do, and then I realized I didn't want to be in them anymore, and I wanted to write for people who were underserved and who don't have necessarily the chance to perform something that they would want to perform because society tells us you're not allowed to do that. So, what I ended up doing, my first, very, very, very first play, I couldn't get it out of me. I wrote about Levittown, Long Island. This place is scary. These are the types of places that breed serial killers and shit. In the city, slice or bang, that's it. Here they will track you down, cut off your limbs, and keep you boxed up in the freezer for months. It's true. No, it's messed up out here, probably because everyone who is here doesn't want to be, and they got stuck here. Because I'm not getting stuck here. No, it's like it's like nothing matters here. I don't matter. You don't matter. All I'm saying is white people in this country don't know what it means to be white and what it gets them. But we do. We think about it day in, day out, every day. Like when I tell people I'm Latino, I get the double take, and not from whites, also from Latinos, because I don't speak Spanish, nor do I care to. But that apparently doesn't make me Latino enough. I'm either denying my heritage or I want to be white. Why can't I just be? I was born here. Why the hell should I speak Spanish? What do they want? Anyone can learn a second language. You can learn a second language, right? Would then that make you can learn Spanish? Would that make you Latino? No. I'm not saying I want to be white. No, I'm saying to hell with labels and just living. That was the passage from the main character in my play about Levittown, Long Island, which is called Nico is a Fashion Model, about a teenage kid, Latino kid who is obsessed with the punk scene. If you know anything about punk, it's not very friendly to minorities. And it was this desire to want to identify to a different culture than their own and the culture that they were surrounded by, but not fitting in the punk scene, not fitting in with Latinos, and being on the outskirts. Writing about identity. I think sometimes I get upset because playwrights will say, oh, I'm writing about identity. And it's like, it's the go-to answer, but the truth is identity is at the core of humanity. If we're stripped of who we are, we no longer have a purpose in life. That's why you even look at why the battle for same-sex marriage was so important. Why? Because it's like we would be non-existent. Just recently, just a few, I think yesterday or a day ago, Trump is stripping LGBTQ people from the census. Stripping them. Saying they don't belong in the census because they do not exist. And what I'm saying is we do exist. And there is a way to make us show that we exist through, and it could be through art. And art is a way to make us visible and say we are here and we are taking space. Ooh. Jesus Christ, that's what I get for wearing heels. So we're taking up space, and we should take up space. And that is the point of art. Does that make sense? Great. So what I was talking about before, I was talking a little bit about searching. What does searching mean? And I realized I couldn't just do this by myself. I couldn't just talk about, when I was preparing for this lecture, I was like, there's no way that I can talk about this and try and be one voice. So I emailed and called a few notable playwrights that I know and asked them for their opinion on a prompt that I gave them, which is based on this. So advocacy through authenticity, playwriting as activism. What does it mean to be an activist? Activism isn't in a vacuum. Activism is an action. That's why act is part of the word. So writing a play in itself is not activism. It's what you do with that play. It's how that play is presented. It's the communities that you go into to present plays. It's one thing to present a play for people that are just like you. It's like the people who post on Facebook, political statuses, and they're just preaching to the choir. That's not activism. That's just saying to your friends, hey, can you believe this? Yeah. That's not activism. Activism is when you're taking action and you're presenting it to the people and the people that don't know. So The first person who I don't know, but who I admire, and I found this quote from Maria Irene Fornes, who is a Cuban-American playwright, avant-garde playwright. She writes, "When I'm not doing something that comes deeply from me, I get bored. When I get bored, I get distracted. And when I get distracted, I become depressed. It's a natural resistance, and it ensures your integrity." The purpose of being truthful and authentic and having something that comes specifically from you as an artist is the magic potion. That's when the work flies and becomes transcendent. And it has to come from you and innately you, and not trying to fit yourself in a box. I tried to fit myself in a box, and now I'm professionally J. Julian Christopher. Do I regret it? Yeah. Does everyone know me as that now? Yeah, so I'm stuck, right? So the next person I asked, well, I didn't ask Maria Irene Fornes. She's in a nursing home in Washington Heights, and she's an amazing and a huge influence on my work. But all the playwrights coming up, I asked directly. Dominique Morisseau is a wonderful, wonderful playwright, award-winning playwright. She has had shows at the Atlantic Theater. I believe she's working on a musical right now that's probably headed for Broadway, based on the life of the Temptations. And she wrote about disenfranchised people. She writes about Black people in Detroit in her cycle, the Detroit Chronicles. She says, "Playwriting is one major part of my activism arsenal. It is where I can expose the people behind the politics, the people affected by some of the most dehumanizing policies and social practices. And mostly it is a way for me to give voice and compassion and righteous rage to my community, thereby defending their humanity to the world, which is ultimately the greatest mission of an activist." Defending humanity. And you don't only have to be a person of color, a queer person, or a marginalized person to defend humanity. Advocates provide platforms for people who don't have a voice and voiceless. They don't speak for them, they provide the platforms. That's a true advocate. The next person I asked was Diana O. Amazing, amazing playwright who is also an activist. You may have seen, there was a viral video that went around of her standing in her lingerie on a soapbox in Times Square, and with messages about rape culture and sexism and misogyny. And she goes out, she actually travels and goes out and promotes her story. And I wanted to have you hear it from her own words. So she sent me a little iPhone video clip.
I turned to theater making and writing and songwriting and creating from a place of necessity. And I find that when I feel the need to say something, I end up making something. And so I think that in itself turns into advocacy, as I am a queer woman of color. So I have a certain gaze on the world and a certain opinion and a certain experience. And that's the place I create from.
She's a queer woman of color and has a certain gaze on the world and a certain opinion and a certain experience. That's the place she creates from. The reason this is so important is because the voices that we hear and see on a regular basis are the same voices, or voices telling us what certain people should sound like, what certain people should say, how they should say it, how to be a proper minority, how to be the minority that knows its place and makes everything accessible for the majority. That's not activism. That's placating. The next person I asked is Oren Squire, who I had the privilege of going to grad school with and is a good friend of mine. He is an award-winning playwright, wrote a play called Obamaology about the idea of being post-racial in an Obama world. And he also is a writer on the hit TV series This Is Us, that some of you may have seen. He wrote quite a few of the episodes.
Hi, my name is Oren Squire. I am a playwright, journalist, TV writer, and activist. I think the most important thing we need to be doing as activists is searching, which is going outside of our comfort zone and trying to use art to learn about things we don't know. And searching is different from research. Research is reviewing what we already think we know and telling the audience and lecturing them. And I think as artists, activists, the greatest thing we can do is search, to go out into the world and to search for things, to present hypotheses that could be proven right or wrong, and to challenge ourselves. And when we do that, the audience is going to be challenged as well. So that's my message about art and activism. Thank you.
Searching is different from research. It's important to know. Most people think that when by doing research, they're actively learning something, which is somewhat true. But research in form of art is just a way to back up your own bias. Because what happens through research, you're searching for the research that you want to find. You have a hypothesis, you say what you want to say, and then you're looking for the research that backs you up. Rarely do people research and try and go beyond their own ideas of bias, which is why searching is what makes art transcend, because we're searching for an answer. I didn't have an answer as to why my parents didn't teach me Spanish. Maybe they were protecting me. Maybe it came from a place of a trauma from them previously. But these are questions that I would never have been able to try and even figure out and try to answer if I had not tried to search instead of research. I could say, oh, the population, 88.9%, blah, blah, blah. That's fine, statistics are great, but what is underneath it? What is the underbelly? How do we transcend? I also spoke to Raul Castillo, who many of you might know from the HBO show Looking. He was one of the main characters. He played Richie. He was also on Gotham as a villain. He's all over TV, but he's also an extremely accomplished playwright. And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, hi, my name is Raul Castillo. I'm a playwright, and I'm from a small town in South Texas called McAllen. It's a border town. And I've always felt that I've used playwriting as a way to put people on stage that I don't normally see on stage. I think I was inspired by Miguel Piñero and Luis Valdez, writers like that, who put people on stage that I felt don't normally appear on stage, and that in itself is a form of activism, and I hope it's authentic, because if it's not, then it's whack.
He was inspired by Miguel Piñero and Luis Valdez, who put people on stage that don't normally appear on stage, and that in itself is a form of activism. And I hope it's authentic, because if it's not, then it's whack. And it is. It is absolutely whack, and it's absolutely, completely authentic to Raul. I wouldn't expect him to describe it in any other way. If you're not familiar with Luis Valdez, he was the artistic director of El Teatro Campesino, and he's the father of Chicano theater. And Miguel Piñero is the co-founder of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe in the East Village, and was one of the first playwrights to really examine prison culture after multiple incarcerations. And then spoke to the amazing award-winning playwright Caridad Svich, who is also was a student of Maria Irene Fornes, and an incredible reteller of ancient work and Greek work. She says, it's always about the now. It may be that this historical moment feels more urgent than ever, but all times should feel urgent if we are to make art that is necessary. And if we are really listening ear to ground to the rumbles in the earth and the seas, we are part of our time and also part of the past, looking toward the future. Uncertainty is what we live with. It's easy to settle for or wish for quick fixes, but the soul work that culture demands is long. So practice patience, lots of it, and witness with clear eyes and heart, even when it is tough. It's going to take every bit of you to make things that may last, and that's the bargain. That's the hand you're dealt. None of it may last, but the struggle is worth it. It's interesting, I hear a lot of theater companies to this day, I kind of get annoyed a little bit when I get emails, the spam emails from theater companies saying, now more than ever, art matters. It's like, why now? Why didn't it matter before? Because now we're seeing marginalized people compromised? They've always been compromised, but now it's in your face? Now more than ever is a trick phrase. It's not true. It's always the time for urgency. It is always the time to humanize people who are dehumanized. It is always time to fight for people who don't have a voice. And theater can be that practice because theater it gets into the community. There's something communal about it. Art in itself. Yes, television's great because it can reach mass audiences, but there's something about sitting in a space with someone else and sharing the same air and feeling that energy. That's where activism should start. But writing a play in itself, again, is not activism. It's what you do with it. There must be a collaboration of ideas. There needs to be multiple people in the room to make it work. That's why I chose it as my art. As a writer, I didn't choose to write novels because I needed other people to exist with me and to bounce and share ideas off of. It takes a community to insert that change. It's how you can shift the narrative of society about people who are on the fringe and the outskirts. I think I may have a way to do it, if you'll bear with me. Some people will argue with me, especially theater makers. Many theater makers will argue, and I'm going to get kind of technical in a way, but I'm going to keep it pretty easy for everyone to follow. I think there is an issue with the way that plays are presented through dramatic structure. I think that the structure that drama is going through is not serving marginalized people as it could be. So dramatic structure, as we know it, comes from the Greek philosopher Aristotle, right? It was one to write about drama and describes it in its segments in his work, The Poetics. And it talks about, in simple terms, beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a beginning and a middle and end. That is the structure. It's what we know as plot, right? But from ancient Greece, drama evolved, and then the Roman poet Horace advocated for the 5-act structure, which is what we really know today. And it was really implemented by the German playwright Gustav Freytag, who developed the 5-act structure. And the 5-act structure is what we use to analyze classical and Shakespearean text. So easily to break down 5-act structure, the first act is exposition. Okay? And what I mean by exposition is the given circumstances, so the time, the place, who, where we are, what time period. Act 2 is the rising action. What occurs, what happens, and what are the obstacles that your protagonist faces? And of course, Act 3 is the climax, right? So the climax happens and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It all leads up to the climax. That's where most of the action happens, in Act 3. And in Act 4 is the opposite of rising action, it's the falling action. So that's where everything starts getting wrapped up. Stories that you're like, what happened to this person? That gets wrapped up and you're getting a nice, neat story. And then Act 5 is the denouement, or the resolution. which is the final outcome of the drama. Here is where you really feel the author's tone, and there's usually a moral or a lesson that is learned, right? Why did the character have to suffer this? Why, right? I am less interested in the why. I am less interested in the plot. I don't think I really need to know why why they were waiting for Godot for so long. I don't really need to know that, because what was interesting about it is that when they were waiting. We don't need to know anything else. In Aristotelian theater, characters are shaped by the actions that befall them, but I don't think that serves marginalized communities. I am more open to what I've found, and I didn't even know this structure existed for a while, because we were so hell-bent on Aristotelian structure. I'm more interested in Ovidian structure. So Ovid, the playwright, the poet, he talks about, in his work, Metamorphosis, it's shown that it's about how you get there and what happens to the characters. And it's based not necessarily in plot, but in theme. What is the theme? What is the socioeconomic attributes that are happening to these characters? What is happening around them? It's less involved in what happens and more involved in the now and in the present. The problem sometimes of the Aristotelian structure, which is the 5-act structure of plot, is that there are obstacles the protagonist has to face, right? I'm not saying this is true of all. It takes a deft hand as a playwright to not create stereotypical characters when you're talking about Aristotelian structure. Because if we're facing obstacles, the character is either going to become a stereotype or a victim. Because marginalized people are victims. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by that, because that's a little, intellectual, right? So the example of that, let's take my play that I did that monologue in the beginning from, Animals Commit Suicide. The main character is seeking HIV infection. He is looking because he thinks he deserves it, all this stuff. It's based in shame, right? When I originally wrote that play, both characters who were seeking HIV infection were Latino males. Suddenly, the Aristotelian structure has now set me up for creating a stereotype. Because now, when people are watching the play, they're saying, oh, all Latino people want to be infected, all queer Latino males want to be infected with HIV, right? So I realized I have an issue. I cannot make that character Latino. I have to make that character white. And the reason I had to make that character white is because once that character is white, no one is going to go, oh, all white people want to have AIDS. They want to be HIV positive. That is just not how it happens. Because what will happen is if I make that character Latino, I am saying something about Latino culture that's not in the play. Even though it's not in the play, I'm saying something about it. So Aristotelian structure many times can set your characters up as a playwright to be victims or stereotypes. Where Ovid structure is taking the people where they are at the time. What's happening to them in the now. It's not placing them in extreme circumstances and labeling them. So playwright Sarah Ruhl challenges Aristotelian dramatic structure of cause and effect. The structure inherently forces us to view drama through the male lens, patriarchal lens. In her book, 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write on Umbrellas and Sword Fights, Parades, Dogs, Fire Alarms, Children, and Theater, it's a long title, she says, she recalls a young male student of hers describing the structure of Aristotle. And he says to her in the book, well, first it starts out, and then it speeds up, and it's going, and then bam, it's over. Sarah Ruhl reflects on this and says, and I thought, do we think the arc is a natural structure because of the structure of the male orgasm? which creates the male lens. She is she's making an analogy that men have created this structure and they are not allowing anybody else in. She proposes in her book the use of the Ovidian structure, as I just talked about. And it does not strive for unity in content and form so much as a calculated variety. It is the continuity of narrative and not subject matter, which creates the impression of fluidity. This sharpens the audience's curiosity. It allows for a fluctuation between realism and the mythical world. Cause and effect doesn't matter because transformation allows for a more visceral understanding without a clear moral. When the moral is not emphasized, judgment is not a result. Sarah Ruhl also writes in her book, I would argue that at the level of the story we crave transformation as much as we crave verisimilitude. Perhaps Ovidian form is not taught at universities as a genuine narrative form because it's very hard to teach the act of transformation. Aristotle lays out his theories in lecture form, easily accessible, whereas Ovid simply flies, and it is very difficult to teach the art of flying. Arms up in the air, with slats of skin peeking through between denim and cotton, lights flashing, blinding even through tightly shut eyelids, boys to the left of me spraying beads of sweat as they dance to bodies gyrating to boys they just met. The bass is pumping and I glide across the dance floor as if the ground beneath me was a slate of ice and I the Olympic champion Oksana Bayul. But this is no frigid ice skating rink. This is a sauna of erotic possibilities and a place where striking up a conversation with the statue of David doesn't need courage because here rejection isn't scary. It just sucks. I see a man on the dance floor, all shirtless with specks of glitter in his chest hair. He's just hugged the tragic queen with a lifted up lace front. He dances bachata like a Eurotrash meth head, and somehow my heart pounds out of my chest as if I'm bait on a fishing line, trying to reel him in, and it does. The whole room goes into soft focus like we are Tony and Maria at the dance. And I breathe in his fused testosterone sweat and Burberry ether, and I am set into a tailspin of longing and arousal. Don't trip left and right brain, there is no need to argue. This man across from me satisfies logic and imagination. Look at him. I mosey on over to this gorgeous specimen and place my hand on his hip. The music and the dance floor give me power to pursue what I can only look at walking along Orange Avenue. He places his hand on my hip, our pelvises touch, and we are forehead to forehead. A stream of sweat rolls down his head and it mixes with mine. His moves are still Eurotrash-esque, so I pull out my Zumba instructing skills and teach him a proper bachata rhythm. He falls perfectly in line. We dance, I am his teacher, and he is happily my student. That's from a play I wrote called We Are Molecules, and it was commissioned by No Passport Theater and Missing Bolt Productions in regards to the Orlando shooting at Pulse nightclub. The entire collaboration was called After Orlando, and I think they summoned about 100 playwrights to write short pieces for it. I wrote that piece as my first foray into Ovidian structure. Because we all know what happens at the Pulse nightclub, right? We all know who dies. We all know who was wounded and victim. But I refuse to have these characters become victims. They're not victims. So I chose to use the Ovidian structure to talk about the safe space that they occupied. The safe space that was violated. We don't need to know the end. We know what's happening in the space. For LGBTQ people, that bar is like church. And I don't mean that to be offensive or to be divisive. What I mean is that it is a place where you feel safe, where everyone is like you, and you don't have to look over your shoulder, which is the plight of most LGBTQ people in this world. So in the play, he is struggling with his attraction to, obviously, this man across from him on the dance floor, and he's having this fight with his left brain and his right brain, each one side of his brain telling him to give in to the arousal, the other telling him to stop. It's not safe. You never know. You can't even be safe here. And it's about his journey into that. And then the play ends, and we know how it ends. I also brought this into, use this piece for a part of Another, which was the play that Dr. Call was talking about that we presented here. And we actually added an ending in a more Aristotelian structure for that through one of the students, Joel Centeno's playwriting. He wrote an epilogue to it. So we included that. So we collaborated and took that We Are Molecules play and made a new one. But this character, I could not allow the character to be a victim. So I didn't choose to target his victimhood and create that obstacle. I chose to examine where he was at the time. What's so interesting about the Ovidian structure is sometimes it happens to you who doesn't even know it's happening. So again, Another, which was co-directed by Professor Huggins, who is sitting over there, we really created a safe space for students to explore how to devise work. And by devising work, creating work that came from nothing. And in that process itself is activism, because it's providing students who normally don't have a voice in class, right? There's sort of this idea of authority and obeying that authority, allowing them to take control and ownership of their own voices, especially since our community here is Queens. We're one of the most diverse communities ever. We need to give them a platform for their voices. So just the act of devising and creating work from nothing as a community, in a group, and allowing students to feel empowered to create is radical. Look, to be an artist is radical, right? We're in a capitalist society. I didn't go into this thinking I was going to be a millionaire, right? It's a radical idea to do this and choose to do this. But for every artist who is in the room, and you know who you are, you can't not do it. It's impossible. It's like breathing. If you stop, a part of you dies. So the art can be transcendent. And the act of creating art can be transcendent, depending on how you create it, how you choose to create it. Do you choose to create victims? Do you choose to create stereotypes? Do you choose to create hierarchy? That is what prevents activism from happening. That is when the art truly cannot fly. Doesn't matter if it's Aristotle, it doesn't matter who it is. The art cannot fly if you do not allow characters to live in their truth and in their authentic voice. And if you are writing a piece that is about a voice that is not your own, don't research, search. The difference, remember the difference between research and searching. Don't research and just justify your own biases. That becomes a stereotype. Search for the truth and the meaning of what's happening in these characters, in humanity. Don't dehumanize them through your work because you were lazy and didn't search. That's my message to artists. How we choose to use our art can change the narrative of our culture. For me, I write for representation. I write for that kid that grew up in the suburb of Long Island, the 88.9% white suburb, for the queer kid walking into his first gay club, for the anglicized Latino who doesn't speak a word of English, for our students who have stories upon stories to tell, but just maybe not in the way you've heard them before. But there's room for them and there's room for everybody. But we need to make it. Those gatekeepers, the ones who hold it, we need to make the room for those stories. I'll leave you with a selection from my latest play called Bruise and Thorn, which is not finished yet. I'm not going to tell you what it's about because, as I said before, it doesn't matter what happens. I just want it to fly. I gotta leave New York City. This city is bringing me down some. This shit's depressing as fuck. This shit is transient, son. People come, people go, people dumb, people know. They come again and I get so look, I'm holding it down here in Jamaica where the buses and trains converge. I'm on the verge of a fit, tell it, about to merge all my feelings. But we ain't living in motherfucking Illinois. Here in Jamaica, Queens, we take and destroy. Employ, suppress the honest. Use them up like toys. See, New York City keep people distant like that. I wear another kind of hat, ghetto barred, swallow hard, like you living for fat. New York City where you go when you're socially feeble. Closing the door to that steeple. I don't want to see all them people or interaction, vulnerable abstraction, overreaction to the feeble fable New York City is constructing. Condos, destructing any sense of nostalgia. Nah, nostalgia's for straight white dudes. They got the luxury to reflect. Meanwhile, I'm gonna try to deflect another asshole walking on the wrong side of the road. Get the fuck out of my way, bro, before I bust your nose. I was born into Jamaica eating an E-Train churro. I was born into Queens. I was born into this borough. It's all concrete and trash and concrete. That's why this place don't sleep, or however the saying goes on the tourist bait t-shirt hose. It's just sharp edges waiting to cut you at every turn. It's thorn-worthy ass shit and lessons learned. Jamaica's a boxer, and you're the sparring partner or the punching bag with that 718 swag. It's like a Hannibal mask up in Jamaica where they beg for coins. They want that loot. Even if they gotta give up the coot, the only route, points moot, love the suit. But ain't living in motherfucking CT where it's mansions and pretty anti-city shit. They got them dollars, button-down collars. New York got the game, money the same, but the needy tame on the pavement. No shame, the politicians to blame. New York City, a symbol of interlace. What a fucking disgrace that as long as I've been laying my lineage to trace, Lady Liberty don't belong to this place in all her green grace. She floating in Jersey. Immigrants thirsty in a hurry to end up in a gurney. American dreams are for rich white dudes. They got all the means to try and fail. Let dreams sail and marinate for the victory in hell. This ain't the path for the rest of us. We just another Rosa fighting for a seat in the front of the bus. It makes you sick. Smog up all in your nostrils like blows snorted from hostile people looking like fossils or walking dead. It all fucks with your head like utility bills. Stacked up and overspilled, New York City is dead. That's the point of this thread. Nostalgia's for straight white dudes. They got luxury to reflect. Meanwhile, I'm a deflect. Check it. I was born into Jamaica eating an E-Train churro. I was born into Queens. I was born into this borough. It's all concrete and trash and concrete, and that's why this place don't sleep, or however the fuck the saying goes, on those tourist bait t-shirt hose. It's just sharp edges waiting to cut you at every turn, thorn-worthy ass shit and lessons learned. Jamaica's a boxer, and you are the sparring partner, or the punching bag with that 718 swag. I gotta leave New York City. This city's bringing me down some. Shit's depressing as fuck. Shit is transient, son. People come, people go. People are dumb, people know, and I get so. Thank you for coming. Thank you. So this is the part where we say, hey, you have any questions? And I try to answer them. So if you have any questions, there's some mics up there. Thanks, Billy. Do you have a question? Oh, you're just handing. Okay, thanks. You don't have to have one. Thank you.
I have a question. This was very, very moving, what you just read, but it didn't sound like drama. It sounded like poetry. And I just wondered, what's the difference? How do you define one versus the other?
That's a great question. Poetry, well, it's so interesting because it depends on your definition of drama. So drama, especially in Latin culture, if you look at some of the most amazing Latino playwrights, such as Jose Rivera, it's all very much steeped in poetry. And that's what's so much more fun about the Ovidian structure for me, because in an Aristotelian structure, I feel a need to speak in realism. And I think that there is a way through Ovidian structure to transform and go beyond natural dialogue to get to a visceral understanding of a character. I could have said that in realism. I could have been like, New York City's dying and like all these condos are going up. Doesn't that suck? But there's something different. The rhyme scheme pulls you in and it creates the transformation that you couldn't have through natural dialogue. And you can do that in that structure because it allows for magical realism and fabulism, which is when magic happens to people and they have to deal with it in a play. Does that answer your question?
Usually when I think of drama, I think of at least a dialogue rather than, although there are monologues in plays,
Yeah.
but it seems as though there was just one character, there wasn't an interaction at all. And to me, drama usually involves some kind of interaction.
You're absolutely right. If you've, we didn't have time to do the full scene, but he's answering someone's question in that play. So. Sorry, I'm here. So what happens is it becomes a monologue, and the monologue starts and then becomes this sweeping transcendence, and then they turn into chickens, but it's a long story. They do. It takes place in a cockfighting ring, where like the chickens are actually these queer people. And they chicken fight and they death drop and do all like ball culture, like, yeah, serve, right? They do all of that, but then they go into this transcendent space. So what happens is with the Ovidian, it sounds so weird, but I'd say it out loud. What happens with the Ovidian structure is that you can go to places that you never knew because you don't have to follow, okay, now I gotta get to the climax, what happens? So this actually is a dialogue, and if you had the rest of the scene, you would hear the dialogue. Yeah. But great question. It's a hard balance. What is poetry and what's not? Anyone else? Oh, that was easy. Oh, great.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, well, that's weird. Okay. So I was wondering, in regards to today's political climate and such, would you say that activism, especially in regards to politics and people's rights and or lack thereof, is more crucial than ever? And if so, how would you go about that, portraying that?
No, I think I just think that the conversation is at the forefront. I think it's always been crucial, and we just haven't seen it I think that we haven't seen it on this mass scale, and we haven't seen someone actively display it, as our current president does. Sorry to get into politics, but he's actively displaying it. There have been presidents that have felt the same things that he has, right? But it's covered, so it's not on display, right? So the idea that someone can be so forthright, it's actually an act, for me, it's an act of terror. It's an act of telling someone that they don't matter and saying that you don't belong here. So yes, as I said before, as Caridad Switch said before, it may seem like now is more urgent than ever, but it's always been urgent. We're just finally talking about it. It's the same thing with like police brutality against black men, right? We were all like, oh my God, this is happening? Yeah, it's been happening for years. Rodney King, that was the first time we saw it on film. And now everyone has a camera, so we see it on the regular, right? So we're seeing it on the daily, so now we think it's a problem, but it's always been there. It's just been exposed now. And now we have a president who's exposed our shame. I don't know if that answers your question.
It did. Thank you very much.
I mean, everything I do is steeped in activism. Even if it's not activism, I'm not like, rah, rah, act up, fight AIDS, or Black Lives Matter, but it's the undercurrent of my work. It's the underbelly.
I was wondering, how did it feel when you actually, for the first time, when you did your first activism? Like, when you actually felt like you did your part in activism, what was it and how did
Yes, I remember the
change?
exact moment. I was the first time I was an advocate, and I was an unwilling advocate. I went to Rider University. God, I'm just gonna get sued. But I went to Rider University, and after the LASSO, the Latin American Student Organization I got kicked out of, I decided to join Rider Flag, which was Friends of Lesbians and Gays at the time, and this was in 1996, 97. And I remember I went, and there was only 2 people there, 2 lesbians and me. And I was like, great. So, and then they were graduating, and then the club was gonna die because no one was out at the time. And so I became president of the organization. And then I remember being at open house where high schools would come to visit to see what clubs were there. And I was the only one there because there was like 2 other people in the club that I figured out later the next semester, but they refused to be in open house because they were closeted. So I sat at the table, and I remember the admissions director, I won't say her name, but, but the admissions director came up and she like put her hand on my back and said, "Are you getting a lot of attention this way?" And I said, and also people couldn't see my materials, so I put a flyer on my chest with a phone call. And she said, "Are you getting a lot of attention this way?" And I was like, yeah. People are memorizing the phone numbers because no high school student is going to come up with their mom and dad and be like, "I want to check out the gay club," right? Not in 1996. So, and then she was like, "Well, I find it offensive. I need you to take it off." And I said, "Well, I find this offensive." I'm like, and I said, "Do you want the Black Student Union to put the bags over their heads?" She's like, "Well, we put you in the front. What more do you want?" And I said, "Well, we gave you your own water fountains." She did not like me. So, so I made a thing about it. She reported me to the club, my club advisor, and said that that Jimenez boy was acting out. She made it sound like I was streaking across campus. So then I wrote an article for the paper exposing her, and it became a thing, and it became a bigger thing. And then I became like the gay activist kid on Long Island, in New Jersey, because I was a writer, on campus. So I became an activist because immediately I was confronted with bias that I hadn't experienced. When I was in high school, I went to a Catholic high school in Long Island, Holy Trinity, and I came out during high school, and they were great. So I thought I would go to college and it would be great, and it wasn't. I've received probably the most anti-queer hate that I have ever received during the 4 years I was at Rider University. It was probably the worst 4 years of my life. So it felt charged and exciting, but also really dehumanizing and angry. I was really angry for a long time. So I hope that answers it. I got it. Yes.
Hi, this is going to be a difficult question to ask, but when you were talking about the Ovid structure, the Ovidian structure, I remembered back in 2005, I produced a play I had written, which was really like an oratorio. It was really a strange play, and it was set to music, and it was about this black woman confronting this white comedian whom she disagreed with, and there was like kind of like dialogue between them. I don't know how well it was produced. It, mainly got middling to bad reviews. But there was this one reviewer who came, and he left after 15 minutes. And I saw that he had put that up there, that he left the show after 15 minutes. I asked him why. He asked me to send him the script, which I did. He took out one particular line in the script and took it out of context and implied that the play was about nothing. I was very angry about that. So there was back and forth email between us. He finally said, "You have to be careful about your subject matter." I wrote back to him and said, "Oh, now we're getting somewhere. You had a problem with the subject matter. What was it about the subject matter that bothered you?" He said, "Oh, this is starting to feel unhealthy, and I don't think we should continue this anymore." From what I had written, the first 5 minutes was crammed with subject matter. The first line was, "I didn't build a career out of being real, I built it out of being shrewd." That was the first line of the play. How can you say that's about nothing? So I don't know if I have a question in that, but I guess it's...
I have a comment.
Please.
He was like, your play's about nothing. Immediately, because his own experience, he's only researched, not searched. He's only coming from his bias. So his bias is, what if it's about nothing? Why does something have to, why does there have to be a plot? That's a very narrow view, and it's also a very male view, unfortunately. And when you think about minority writing, you think about Latin playwrights, when you think about, for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow isn't enough, right? That's poetry. That's Ovidian structure. It's actually didactic poetry, which is as part of Ovidian structure. And you think about how that flies and how that sings. It's because marginalized people go to those places because they have no other choice. It's the only way they could express themselves is going around this patriarchal structure that has been implemented on us that makes us be victims. That's my personal, I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of comments when this gets up on YouTube. So. Well, the trolls will come out and argue with me. But I will argue that I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying for the most part. It takes a really skillful hand to not create victimization and stereotypes in characters through that structure. It's just very hard to do.
Thank you.
But I would love to read that play. Like, that's the play I want to see, so.
In terms of your writing and everything that you've performed in so far, what do you think is the most important thing you've learned about yourself, not just in terms of your identity, but just as a human being?
Wow, that's... That question alone got you the extra credit. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate that.
Well, I've learned that I'm a resilient person, and I have learned that, and I'm only going to talk about the queer Latino experience because I can't speak for Latinas and I can't speak for other queer people, but my queer Latino, I feel like we're a really resilient people because we were forced to be, and we had to be. And I'll talk specifically about queerness. Queer people, for the most part, there are exceptions, but for the most part, grow up in families who are not queer, right? So the families are not queer. So when you're realizing that you are different and part of a marginalized society, you long for that affection, right? So if someone were to call me a faggot, it's harder for me to go to my father about that because he isn't one. If they call me a spick, I can, because he knows what he's been called that. He knows what that means. Do you know what I mean? So as a queer person, you're forced to be resilient because it begins in such a lonely place. And you don't have to be lonely. And what I've learned through my writing is that I can no longer, so my play is Animals Commit Suicide, Locusts Have No King, all these different plays that I've written up until recently have been in Aristotelian structure because I was writing from a place of shame. And I was writing from a place of these characters have shame and they need to deal with it. It fits that structure because they're the victims. How do I deal with my shame? I've been writing Bruise and Thorn, which still isn't finished, the last one that passage I read for you, and it has not worked. I haven't been able to write it until recently. And now I'm able to write it because I've discovered that I don't need to fit into the structure. I'm writing about a celebration of queerness. And it's not steeped in shame. So I'm like, what happens to these people? Like, it's like they're celebrating their fact. I'm like, there needs to be something else. There needs to be this. There needs to be that. What I've learned is that there doesn't need to be an answer to art. So there needs to be the question, there needs to be the impetus, and there needs to be the search. So I'm less interested in learning about plot or what happens, and I'm more interested in seeing the search that people go through. And I've learned that I'm constantly searching all the time, which is why I don't stop writing.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, first of all, I'm very uncomfortable with the word queer. I don't like it. Sure. Whatever. Okay. I would like to ask you, if I may, where are your parents in all this? You mentioned your sister. What understanding do they have about you?
My mother is deceased,
Mm-hmm.
and my father is working.
Okay.
I'm very open with my family. My latest play, which is just won an award, is called The Guiltmongers, and it's actually, Dana doesn't know this, sister, but it's actually about my mother's death and the time that our family spent in hospice. Can I ask you a question? Why are you uncomfortable with the word queer?
Because I don't like it. It's an uncomfortable word.
Why?
Does that have to mean strange? I mean different.
It is.
It's different.
Yeah.
But queer brings up all, I don't know.
Well, queer to me is more encompassing of an entire culture. So it's lesbian, bisexual, intersex, trans, gender nonconforming. It's more inclusive word. And queer is, I think people get upset with the word queer because it means different and strange or funny, right? And I think that if you flip the idea of the lexicon that we're using, right, queer people are different than heterosexual people, and that's okay. I am against the societal narrative that we have to be the same, or they're just like us. I'm like, no, I'm not just like straight people, and that's okay. Straight people can be straight people. I'm not, and I'm okay with straight people. They should be straight. They should be okay with me. So queer to me is all-encompassing, and it's also the same. It's also to me in the same vein as in the African American community with the N-word, and taking that word that was used as a tax and to vilify us, and reversing it and reclaiming that word and saying, yes, this is me, and now that word doesn't hurt me anymore. And it's part of my culture. So I used to identify just as gay. I no longer identify as gay. I identify as queer, because sometimes I'm non-gender conforming. Sometimes I wear, harem pants and look, dress more feminine. And sometimes I have long hair and I'll put it in a ponytail, because no one in the world will ever dictate who I should be. And so that's why queer, I wear it as a badge of pride. So I understand why it makes you uncomfortable, and I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, that's okay. You have to realize I'm old. I come from a world where gay meant happy.
Absolutely. And I am. I'm very happy. Thank you.
I was going to ask who here are students, but I believe we all are tonight, with an educator, right?
You must be right here. Right up there. And somewhere around.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank all of you. As is our custom, we have some light refreshments. And in the spring, it is the spring. The fall, we'll have another special event. But it would be a hard act to follow, Julian. There it is. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.